Everyone wants to be the lion. It's the archetype we're sold from the moment we're old enough to understand stories. The lion is brave. The lion is regal. The lion roars, and the jungle shakes. We look at leaders, CEOs, politicians, and we say, I want that. We want the command, the raw power, the ability to crush opposition just by showing up. But Machiavelli, he looks at the lion and sees a corpse in the making. He doesn't deny the utility of strength. He's not a pacifist, far from it. In The Prince, specifically in chapter 18, he admits that a ruler often has to abandon laws and act like a beast to survive. He tells us that there are two ways of fighting, one with laws, which is the way of men, thing in the room. That is the trap. Machiavelli warns that those who wish to be only lions do not understand. They don't get it, because the lion has a fatal flaw, a blind spot so big you could drive an army through it. The lion cannot see snares. Think about it. The lion is built for confrontation. If a wolf pack comes, the lion wins. If an enemy declares war, the lion fights. But what happens when the threat isn't a wolf? What happens when the threat is a hole in the ground covered by leaves? What happens when the threat is a contract with fine print, or a handshake that isn't what it seems, or a whisper campaign behind closed doors? The lion charges, and the lion falls into the pit. Machiavelli argues that relying on strength makes you predictable, and in the game of power, predictability is death. If I know you will always attack when provoked, I can provoke you into a trap. If I know you will always charge, I just have to dig a hole where you're going to step. He points out that the world isn't a straight fight. If it were, the strongest would always win. But look at history, look at business. The strongest rarely finish on top. They get outmaneuvered, they get leveraged out, they get taken down by people with half their resources, but double their awareness. So he introduces the other half of the equation. A prince, therefore, being compelled knowingly to adopt the beast, ought to choose the fox and the lion, because the lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against wolves. He's telling us that strength without perception is just suicide. This leads him to a very uncomfortable conclusion, one that makes people hate Machiavelli to this day. He attacks the very idea of keeping your word. The lion keeps his word because the lion has honor. The lion thinks, I said it, so I will do it. It feels good. It feels righteous. Machiavelli says it's stupid. He writes, a prudent ruler cannot, and must not, honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage, and when the reasons for which he made it no longer exist. He's not telling you to be a liar for the fun of it. He's not telling you to be chaotic. He's acting like a cold, rational doctor diagnosing a disease. The disease is human nature. He argues that if all men were good, this advice would be bad. If you could trust everyone to keep their word to you, then sure, keep your word to them. Be the noble lion. But men are not good. They are wretched creatures, as he calls them. They will break their faith with you the second it serves them. So if you stay loyal to a promise that hurts you, while everyone else is playing by different rules, you aren't being moral. You're being a victim. You are letting yourself be trapped by your own reputation. This is the trap of strength. It's the belief that if you are just strong enough, loud enough, and honorable enough, you will be safe. Machiavelli shatters that glass. He points out that your enemies don't care about your honor. In fact, they are counting on it. They are counting on you being rigid. They want you to be the lion, because the lion is easy to trick. Real power, according to Machiavelli, isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you see. The lion sees the enemy in front of him. That's easy. Anyone can see the guy holding the sword.
But can you see the strings? Can you see the snare? Can you see that the person shaking your hand is smiling too much? If you can't, all that strength is useless. It's just energy waiting to be used against you. Machiavelli forces us to accept that the world is a dangerous place, not just because of violence, but because of deception. Violence you can fight with strength. Deception, you can't punch a lie. You can't claw your way out of a political setup. So the first step to survival isn't pumping iron, it's opening your eyes. It's realizing that being the tough guy is often just a vanity project. It feels good to the ego, but it leaves the throat exposed. He wants you to survive. And to survive, you have to stop worshiping the lion. You have to stop thinking that force is the answer to every problem. You have to realize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to roar, but to sniff the air, realize something smells wrong, and walk the other way. Because the woods are full of traps, and the lion steps in every single one of them.
Everyone wants to be the lion. It feels good, doesn't it? The archetype, the king of beasts. Strong, brave, dominant. You look at history, you look at the heavy hitters, and you think, that's it. That is power. You roar, the jungle shakes, and everyone gets out of your way. It's romantic. It satisfies the ego. But Niccolo Machiavelli, he doesn't care about your ego, and he certainly doesn't care about romance. He cares about survival. He cares about staying alive in a world that is actively trying to kill you. And he warns us very clearly that the lion has a fatal flaw, a blind spot wide enough to drive an empire through. See, Machiavelli argues that most leaders fail not because they are weak, they fail because they are printed up. They fail because they fall in love with their own strength. They think that if they just push harder, if they just yell louder, reality will bend to their will. It's a seduction, the seduction of clarity. Brute force is simple. A problem arises, smash it. An enemy speaks up, crush them. It feels efficient. But Machiavelli looks at this and shakes his head. He points out that this reliance on force is actually a form of naivete. It assumes that the world is a straight fight, a boxing match where you can see your opponent, you know the rules, and the strongest arm wins. But the world isn't a boxing match, it's a swamp. In The Prince, Machiavelli breaks it down in chapter 18. He tells us there are two ways to fight. One is by law, that's for civilized men. The other is by force. He says the first one often isn't enough. People are wretched, they don't follow the law, so you are forced to use the second method. You have to be a beast. But here is where most people get it wrong. They stop reading there. They think be a beast means be a monster, be a lion. Machiavelli says no. That's suicide. He writes, a lion cannot defend himself against snares. Read that again. Cannot. Not might struggle with. Cannot. The lion can kill a wolf. He can tear a distinct enemy to shreds. But he cannot see the trap. He cannot fight a conspiracy. He cannot claw his way out of a plot hatched in a whisper 3 weeks ago by a smiling advisor. The lion fails because he is blind to the hidden mechanics of power. He walks into the room, chest out, expecting a brawl. He doesn't realize the floor has been greased. He doesn't realize the contract was rigged. He assumes that because he is feared, he is safe. But Machiavelli warns that fear is a tricky thing. It works until it doesn't. If you are always the lion, always aggressive, always open, always relying on terror, you become easy to read. Your enemies know exactly what you will do. And if I know exactly what you will do, I own you. I don't have to fight you.
I just have to dig a hole where I know you're going to step. This is the hard truth Machiavelli serves up. He says that those who simply act like lions are stupid. They don't understand human nature, because humans are liars. Machiavelli is incredibly cynical here, but he's right. He reminds the prince that men are wretched creatures who would not keep their word to you. So why are you keeping your word to them? The lion keeps his word because of honor, because of pride. He thinks deception is beneath him. He thinks lying is for cowards. Machiavelli argues that this kind of honor is a luxury you cannot afford. If you walk around with noble intentions and a big stick in a world of snakes, you don't get a medal, you get eaten. So why do lions fail? They fail because they treat complex problems like nails that just need a bigger hammer. They fail because they lack range. They are one-dimensional players in a multi-dimensional game. Machiavelli is practically screaming at us to wake up from the dream of the noble king. He points out that reality is a mask. People say one thing and do another. Alliances are temporary. Loyalty is a transaction. The lion doesn't get this. The lion believes the mask is the face, and that is why he ends up in the snare. He wins the battle? Sure. Maybe he wins 10 battles, but he loses the war. He loses the crown, not because he was overpowered, but because he was outmaneuvered. He was so busy roaring that he didn't hear the trap snap shut until it was too late. So, Machiavelli tells us, force is necessary. You need the lion's claws. But claws are useless if you're caught in a net. You need something else. You need a different set of eyes. You see, everyone loves the lion. It's the symbol we put on flags. It's the statue in front of the palace. The lion represents raw power, courage, the ability to smash your enemies into the dust. And Machiavelli, he respects the lion. He knows you need the teeth and the claws to scare off the wolves. But he warns us, explicitly, that if you rely only on the lion, you're dead. You're finished. Why? Because the lion is blind. It has no subtlety. It charges in a straight line. And because it charges in a straight line, it walks right into traps. It cannot defend itself against snares. This is where the fox enters the room. Machiavelli argues that a prince must learn to be a great pretender and dissembler. He doesn't say this quietly. He shouts it from the pages. He tells us that while the lion frightens the wolves, only the fox can recognize the traps, and the world is full of traps. Now, this is the part where people usually get uncomfortable, because Machiavelli is attacking something we're all taught to value: honesty, integrity, keeping your word. We're raised to believe that a man's word is his bond, right? That if you make a promise, you keep it, no matter the cost. Machiavelli looks at that idea and laughs. He points out a brutal reality of the political landscape. He says, a prudent ruler cannot and must not honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage, and when the reasons for which he made it no longer exist. Must not should not, must not. His logic is terrifyingly simple. If all men were good, if everyone played by the rules, then sure, you should keep your word. You should be honest. But they aren't good. He reminds us that men are wretched creatures who would not keep their word to you. So why on earth should you keep your word to them? It's a zero-sum game for him. If you play the saint in a world of sinners, you don't go to heaven, you go to ruin. But here's the trick, and this is the genius of the fox. You can't just go around lying to everyone's face. That's clumsy. That's not a fox, that's just a liar. A fox is smarter than that. Machiavelli insists that you have to be a master of appearance. You have to color your nature. You have to be an actor on the grandest stage. He brings up Pope Alexander VI. Now this guy, history tells us he was a piece of work. Machiavelli says Alexander never did anything or thought of anything other than deceiving men. That was his whole job. That was his entire strategy. And guess what? It worked every single time. He promised things with huge, solemn oaths, swore on the Bible, swore on his soul, and he broke every single one of them the moment it suited him. And he got away with it. Why? How do you get away with constant deception? Machiavelli gives us the answer, and it's an insult to our intelligence, quite frankly. He says, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." That's the key. People want to believe. We are desperate for the illusion. We want the politician to tell us the economy is fixed. We want the leader to tell us we're safe. We want the lie because the truth is too uncomfortable to look at. The fox knows this. The fox feeds us the lie because it's what we're hungry for. So the successful ruler, the one who survives, is the one who understands that truth is just a tool, like a hammer. Sometimes you use it, sometimes you put it down. He goes even deeper into this psychology of the crowd. He argues that the mob, the vast majority of people, judge only by their eyes. They don't judge by their hands. What does that mean? It means everyone can see what you appear to be. Very few get close enough to touch what you actually are. Everyone sees the mask. Everyone sees the robe, the crown, the pious expression, the charitable donation. They see the performance. And the few who do know the truth, the few who are close enough to touch the reality and feel that you're actually a cold-blooded manipulator, they don't dare speak up because the mob is loud and the mob is captivated by the appearance. Machiavelli lists 5 qualities that you need to seem to have. You need to appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious. He stresses that last one, religious. You must seem incredibly pious. But he warns you, do not actually possess these qualities to the point where they tie your hands. If you are actually truly merciful all the time, you'll let disorder run rampant. If you are truly faithful, you'll keep a promise that destroys your kingdom. You must have a mind disposed to adapt itself. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to look a man in the eye, shake his hand, promise him the world, and have the dagger ready in your other hand, because you know he's thinking about doing the same to you. It's cynical. God, it's cynical. But Machiavelli isn't writing a Bible. He's writing a survival guide. He's telling us that the world is a forest. The lion roars and thinks that's enough. The lion thinks respect comes from fear of the claws. But the fox knows that sometimes the most effective way to win isn't to fight, it's to smile. It's to tell the enemy exactly what he wants to hear, right until the moment the trap snaps shut. So when he praises the cunning fox, he isn't praising evil. He's praising awareness. He's praising the ability to see the strings, to see the snares, and to understand that in the game of power, the one who is honest is the one who is eaten. You have to be the fox to survive the traps, so that you can live long enough to be the lion when the wolves come knocking. You've been told that a leader's word is their bond, that integrity is the currency of power. It sounds nice, doesn't it? It's the kind of thing they teach in ethics classes or print on motivational posters in corporate break rooms. But Niccolò Machiavelli looks at that sentiment, and he doesn't just disagree, he laughs. In the brutal game of statecraft, or really any high-stakes environment where survival is on the line, Machiavelli argues that keeping faith isn't a virtue, it's a liability. Actually, it's worse than a liability, it's a trap. a trap that snaps shut on the naive, the idealistic, and the rigidly honorable. Here is the problem. Machiavelli points out a fundamental, uncomfortable truth about human nature. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He says plainly that if all men were good, this advice would be bad. If you were dealing with angels, with saints, then yes, keep your promises, be transparent, honor every contract to the letter. But he reminds us that we do not live among angels. He argues that men are wretched, they are fickle, they are deceivers, and most importantly, they will not keep their faith with you. So why, he asks, should you keep yours with them? This is where the distinction between the lion and the fox begins to take shape. Think about the lion for a second. The lion is the embodiment of raw power, ferocity, courage. When a lion makes a promise, it keeps it because it believes its strength is enough to overcome any obstacle. The lion thinks, I said I would do this, and I will, because I am strong. But Machiavelli warns that strength isn't enough. He says, the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the world is full of traps. A promise to a cunning adversary is just a lever they can pull to manipulate you. If you are rigid, if you are obsessed with keeping faith regardless of the changing winds, you become predictable. And in Machiavelli's eyes, being predictable is the fastest way to lose your head. He writes in The Prince, and this is the part that usually makes people squirm, that a prudent ruler cannot and must not honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage and when the reasons for which he made his promise no longer exist. Read that again. When the reasons no longer exist. He's telling you that circumstances change, alliances shift, the ground moves under your feet. If you are still holding on to a promise made in a reality that no longer exists, you aren't being noble, you're being suicidal. The fox understands this. The fox knows that a promise is a tool, not a shackle. Machiavelli praises this flexibility. He looks at history, at the great survivors, and he notes a pattern. The leaders who achieved great things were the ones who knew how to trick the minds of men. They were the ones who treated their word as a temporary convenience, not an eternal vow. And those who tried to play by the rules, those who tried to be lions, noble, unyielding, honest to a fault, they were overcome. They were outmaneuvered by those who knew how to play the fox. But here is the trick, and this is where Machiavelli proves he's not just a thug, but a psychologist. You cannot go around announcing that you are a liar. You cannot be openly treacherous. That doesn't work. The fox doesn't wear a sign saying, I will deceive you. Machiavelli argues that you must be a great pretender and dissembler. You have to look like the lion while thinking like the fox. You must seem merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, especially religious. He emphasizes that appearances are everything. The crowd, the vulgar, as he calls them, is always taken in by appearances and results. So the problem of keeping faith is really a problem of perception versus reality. The reality is that you break your word when necessary. The perception is that you are a pillar of integrity. Machiavelli points to Alexander VI. The man was a pope, a holy figure. Yet Machiavelli says Alexander never did anything or thought of anything other than deceiving men. And yet, he always got what he wanted. His deceptions worked. Why? Because he understood this side of human nature perfectly. He knew people wanted to believe. We want to believe the leader is good. We want to believe the contract is solid. And because we want to believe it, we make ourselves easy targets for the fox. It's cynical, I know. It feels cold. But Machiavelli isn't telling you this to make you a bad person. He's telling you this so you don't get eaten. He's warning you that if you cling to a childish notion of keeping faith in a world of wolves, you are doomed. The lion relies on the promise. The fox relies on the result. And in the end, history judges by the result. If you win, if you secure the state, if you maintain power, the means will always be judged honorable and praised by everyone, because the mob only sees the outcome. So the lesson here isn't to be a compulsive liar. It isn't to break promises for the fun of it. That's just being chaotic. The lesson is detachment. Machiavelli wants you to detach your ego from your word. He wants you to see a promise for what it really is, a strategic maneuver. Use it when it serves you, drop it when it hurts you. Do not be the lion who walks proudly into a net because he promised he would walk a straight line. Be the fox who sees the net, sidesteps it, and leaves the lion to his fate. Here is the cold, hard truth about power. It's messy, it's violent, and if you think you can navigate it just by being a good person or following the rules, you are going to get eaten alive. Machiavelli doesn't mince words here. He looks at the history of rulers, the ones who survived, and the ones who ended up with their heads on spikes. And he notices a pattern, a distinction. He tells us there are two ways to fight, two distinct modes of conflict. The first is by law. This is the civilized way. It's the way of men. You sign treaties, you respect institutions, you debate in the Senate, you appeal to justice, fairness, reason. In a perfect world, this would be enough. We'd all sit down, agree on the boundaries, shake hands, and go home. And for a long time, philosophers before Machiavelli pretended that's how it worked. They wrote these long, beautiful treatises on how a prince should be a paragon of virtue, a man of his word, a pillar of the law. But Machiavelli, he looks at that and laughs. He shakes his head because he knows the second mode of fighting, force. This is the way of beasts. It has nothing to do with fairness. It doesn't care about your arguments or your rights. It is raw physical coercion. It is violence. Now, Machiavelli argues that the first method, law, is natural to men. It's what separates us from the animals. But here is the critical pivot. He warns that the first method is often insufficient. Insufficient? That's a polite way of saying it's useless when you're staring down a barrel. See, if everyone else followed the rules, the way of man would work. But men are wretched. That's his baseline. People are greedy, they're liars, they're ungrateful. They will break their word to you the second it serves their interest. So, if you stay locked in the man mode, if you rely only on laws and promises, you are bringing a contract to a knife fight. You will lose. So, he says you must have recourse to the second. You have to know how to be the beast. He isn't saying you should abandon humanity. He isn't saying be a monster 24/7. No, he's saying you need to be amphibious. You need to be able to breathe in the clean air of the court and swim in the mud of the battlefield. You need to possess both natures. To drive this home, he uses an image that sticks with you. He points to the ancient writers. He reminds us that the great heroes of antiquity, Achilles, princes of old, were not sent to normal tutors. They weren't sent to soft philosophers to learn about ethics. They were sent to Chiron, the Centaur. Think about that image for a second. Half man, half horse. Why? Why a centaur? Machiavelli explains that having a teacher who is half beast and half man signifies something crucial. It means a ruler needs to know how to use both natures. One without the other is not durable. It's unstable. If you are only the beast, you're just a thug. You rely on brute force for everything. You kill your enemies, you terrorize your people, and eventually everyone hates you so much they conspire to slit your throat. You lack the cunning of the man, the ability to use law and appearance to stabilize your rule. But if you are only the man, if you refuse to tap into that animalistic side, you're weak, you're prey. You might be morally superior, sure, but you'll be a morally superior corpse. He writes, "Therefore, it is necessary for a prince to understand how to avail himself of the beast and the man." It is about range. It is about optionality. When the courts are open and the people are listening, use the law. Be the man. Be rational. But when the enemy is at the gate, or when a rival faction is plotting a coup, you can't quote the Constitution at them. You have to drop the facade. You have to tap into that beastly nature, the force that ignores rules, and crush the threat. And he implies something else here, something very subtle. He suggests that you cannot truly protect the law unless you are capable of violating it. That sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? But look at the logic. To maintain a state where laws can exist, you must be able to destroy the enemies of that state. And those enemies, foreign invaders, domestic traitors, they don't play by the rules. To stop them, you have to step outside the law. You have to use the beast to secure the space where the man can live. This is why Machiavelli is so controversial. He destroys the idea that might makes right, but he also destroys the idea that right makes might. Being right doesn't give you power. Being lawful doesn't keep you safe. He strips away the moralizing. He tells you, you are a centaur. You are a hybrid creature. Most leaders fail because they pick a lane. They are too soft or they are too brutal. They can't switch. They have a moral code that forbids them from getting their hands dirty, or they have a temperament that makes them unable to be diplomatic. Machiavelli warns that you don't have the luxury of a fixed personality. Your personality must be fluid. It must adapt to the wind of fortune. So the foundation of his entire strategy rests on this acceptance. You have to look in the mirror and accept the beast inside. You have to feed it, train it, and keep it on a leash. Because there will come a day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, when the law fails, when the arguments stop, when the polite society collapses. And on that day, if you don't know how to be the beast, you are finished. Let's get real for a second. When you picture power, what do you see? You probably see the lion. You see the general on the horse, the CEO slamming their fist on the table, the sheer overwhelming force of will that says, I am here and I will crush you. We are hardwired to respect this. We look at the lion and we think, that is safety, that is strength. But Machiavelli, he looks at the lion and he shakes his head. He warns us that if you rely only on the lion, on brute force, on shock and awe, you are not just naive, you are doomed. He doesn't just say this to be poetic, he proves it. He points to history, to the graveyards filled with men who thought a sharp sword was enough to keep them alive. And there is no better example of this, no bloodier, more perfect of the failed lion, than the story of Oliverotto da Fermo. You might not know his name, but you know his type. Oliverotto was a warrior, a mercenary, a man raised in the saddle, smelling of iron and horse sweat. He wasn't a politician, he was a killer. In the early 1500s, he decided he was tired of taking orders. He wanted his hometown of Fermo in Italy for himself. So what does a lion do to take power? He uses teeth and claws. Machiavelli describes exactly how he did it. It wasn't subtle. Oliveretto arranged a grand banquet. He invited the most powerful men in the city, his own uncle included. He wined them, he dined them, he lulled them into a sense of camaraderie. And then, at a signal, his soldiers rushed out from the walls and slaughtered every single one of them. Brutal? Absolutely. Effective? In the short term, yes. Alvarado rode through the town on his horse, terrifying the populace into submission. He set up a government based entirely on fear. He was the ultimate lion. He had the guns, he had the men, and he had the will to use them.
Now, pause here. If you look at this through a standard moral lens, he's a monster. But Machiavelli doesn't care about that. He looks at it strategically. He notes that Alvarado had secured his state. He had eliminated his rivals. He had the lion part of the equation mastered. But here is where the failure happens. Here is where the lion dies.
Alvarado thought his sword made him untouchable. He thought that because he could frighten the wolves, he was safe. But he forgot about the traps. Enter Cesare Borgia. Now, Borgia, he was a lion too, but he was mostly fox. He was cunning. He was watching Alvarado's rise, and he saw an opportunity. He didn't attack Alvarado. He didn't bring an army to Fermo to fight a war. That's what a lion would do, and that's messy. Instead, Borgia set a trap. He invited Alvarado to a meeting at a place called Sinigalia. He framed it as a peace summit, a gathering of powerful allies. He stroked Alvarado's ego. He played on that arrogance that comes with physical strength. And Alvarado, the man who had just slaughtered his own family to seize power, the man who thought he was the scariest thing in Italy, he walked right into it. Machiavelli describes the scene with a dry, almost clinical detachment. Alvarado arrived with his troops, but he left them outside to show respect. He walked into the meeting room, feeling powerful, feeling like a peer to Borgia. He was looking at the horizon, scanning for armies, scanning for lion threats. He didn't look down. He didn't smell the snare. The moment he stepped inside, Borgia's men grabbed him. There was no battle. There was no glory. No charge of the Light Brigade. Just a bag over the head and a cord around the neck. Alvarado de Fermo, the ultimate lion, was strangled to death a year after he took power. Why, Machiavelli argues, it wasn't because he was weak. It wasn't because he lacked courage. It was because he lacked cunning. He points out that those who rely simply on the lion do not understand what they are about. Alvarado knew how to fight, but he didn't know how to navigate the invisible landscape of deception. He assumed that the game of power was played entirely on the battlefield. He didn't realize that the real game is often played in whispers, in handshakes, and in the things that remain unsaid. This is the fatal flaw of the lion. The lion believes that reality is what they can see and touch. They believe that if they are strong enough, reality will bend to them. But Machiavelli tells us that reality is a trap. The world is filled with snares that you cannot slash with a sword. Alvarado failed because he was predictable. Violence is predictable. Force is predictable. If I know you are a lion, I know you will charge. And if I know you will charge, I don't have to fight you. I just have to dig a hole and wait for you to fall in. So when Machiavelli praises the fox, he isn't telling us to be weak. He isn't telling us to be cowards. He is telling us to look at Alvarado's corpse. He is asking us, what good is your strength if you are too blind to see the rope waiting for your neck? The lion commands respect, yes. Fear, yes. But without the fox, the lion is just a well-fed sacrifice waiting for the butcher. And history is full of butchers. So we have the theory, we have the metaphor, but Machiavelli isn't a man of abstract philosophy. He doesn't care about what should happen in an ideal world. He cares about what actually happens when the knives come out. He looks for proof. And for Machiavelli, the ultimate proof, the living, breathing embodiment of the fox, was Cesare Borgia. Now, you have to understand the context here. Machiavelli spent time with Borgia. He watched him work. He saw the Duke in action during his campaign to conquer the Romagna. And what he saw wasn't just a warrior. He saw a cold, calculating intellect that knew exactly when to bite and when to smile. Let's look at the situation in the Romagna. When Borgia took over, it was a disaster. Total anarchy. It was ruled by these petty, weak lords who were more interested in fleecing their subjects than governing them. Robbery, feuds, lawlessness, it was a mess. Machiavelli points out that a ruler in this position has a problem. You need to restore order, right? But restoring order requires force. It requires brutality. If you just go in there as the lion, smashing heads and hanging thieves, you solve the crime problem. But you create a new problem. The people start to hate you. You become the tyrant. And Machiavelli warns us constantly. Hatred is the one thing a prince cannot survive. So what does the fox do? Borgia makes a move that is pure genius. He doesn't get his own hands dirty. Not yet. He brings in a man named Ramiro de Orco, a hard man, cruel, efficient. Borgia gives him full power and says, "Clean this place up." And Ramiro does. He crushes the bandits. He ends the feuds. He establishes peace through absolute terror. The province is pacified. But now, Borgia senses the trap. He sees the snare that would catch a simple lion. He knows that the severity of Ramiro has generated hatred. The people are terrified, yes, but they are simmering. If Borgia keeps this up, that anger will turn on him. So he flips the script. This is the moment of the fox. He needs to show the people that the cruelty wasn't his idea. It was the fault of his nasty minister. He needs to distance himself from the very tool he used to fix the problem. One morning, the people of Cesena wake up and head to the piazza. And there, in the middle of the square, is Ramiro de Orco. Or, well, two halves of him. He's been cut in two. There's a block of wood and a bloody knife beside him. Just picture that. Machiavelli describes the reaction of the people perfectly. He says they were at once satisfied and stupefied. Satisfied because the cruel man was dead. Justice was served. Stupefied because of the sheer, brutal theatricality of it. Who holds the power? The man who cut the executioner in half. Borgia reaped all the benefits of Ramiro's cruelty, the order, the security, and then he reaped all the benefits of Ramiro's death, the popularity, the reputation for justice. He used the lion to do the work, and the fox to take the credit. Machiavelli looks at this, and he doesn't see a crime. He sees a masterpiece. He argues that this deception was necessary. If Borgia had been good and honest from the start, the Romagna would still be a war zone. If he had kept Ramiro alive, the people would have revolted. The fox knows that reality is about perception. Machiavelli tells us that men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone can see what you appear to be. Few experience who you really are. Borgia understood that the crowd is won over by appearances and final results. The result was peace. The appearance was justice. The reality, cold-blooded manipulation. But Machiavelli goes deeper. He looks at Caesar's father, Pope Alexander VI. If Caesar was the student, Alexander was the professor. Machiavelli writes that Alexander never did anything or thought of anything other than deceiving men. That was his entire game. And here is the kicker. He always found victims. You might think, well, eventually people would catch on, right? Eventually the fox gets caught. Not according to Machiavelli. He argues that because human nature is so weak, so simple-minded, and so obsessed with immediate needs, a deceiver will always find someone who lets themselves be deceived. Alexander promised everything. He swore oaths, and he broke them the second it was advantageous. And yet, he succeeded. His deceptions worked every single time. Why? Because people want to believe. The lion thinks he can force the world to bend to his will. The lion thinks a promise is a bond of honor. The fox knows better. The fox knows a promise is just a word, a tool to buy time or gain position. Machiavelli warns that a prudent ruler cannot keep his word when doing so would be against his interest, or when the reasons that made him promise are no longer relevant. If men were all good, this precept would be bad. But because men are wretched creatures who wouldn't keep their word to you, you don't have to keep yours to them. That's the hard truth he's serving up. Cesare Borgia and Alexander VI didn't fail because they lied. They succeeded because they lied. They succeeded because they understood the landscape. They saw the traps. The lion walks into the Romagna and tries to fight the entire population. The lion keeps his promises and gets outmaneuvered. The fox hires a scapegoat, cuts him in half, smiles at the crowd, and rules over a peaceful city. It's dark, it's uncomfortable, but Machiavelli asks us to look at the scoreboard. Who won? Who survived? The triumph of the fox isn't about being evil for the sake of evil. It's about recognizing that the game of power has rules that have nothing to do with Sunday school morality. And if you refuse to play by those rules, well, you're just lunch for the next fox that comes along. You know, there's this image Machiavelli keeps coming back to. It's ancient, mythological, the centaur, half man, half beast. Specifically, he points to Chiron, the tutor of Achilles. Now, why does he care about an old Greek myth? It's not for the poetry. Machiavelli is telling us something fundamental about power. He argues that a ruler, a prince, cannot just be a man. Being a man in this context means operating by law, by rules, by contracts and handshakes and gentlemen's agreements. That's the human way to solve problems. We debate, we litigate, we appeal to reason. And that's great, really. It's noble. But Machiavelli looks at the world as it actually is, not how we wish it was. And he sees a problem. He warns that the human way often isn't enough. Sometimes the law fails. Sometimes reason gets you nowhere. Sometimes you are dealing with people who don't care about your rules. So he says you have to know how to use the beast. He writes, "There are two ways of contending, one by law, the other by force. The first is proper to men, the second to beasts. But because the first is often not sufficient, recourse must be had to the second." Recourse must be had. He's not saying you should be a beast all the time. He's saying you are compelled to be one when the situation demands it. If you stay fully human, if you stick strictly to the moral high ground while your enemies are down in the mud with knives, you lose. You die. Your state collapses. So the prince must be a centaur, capable of switching gears instantly, man to beast, beast to man. But here is where most people get it wrong. They hear beast and they think of brute force. They think of the tyrant, the smash and grab, the sheer application of violence. Machiavelli stops us there. He says, no, that's too simple. That's naive. The beast isn't just one thing. He breaks it down. He says the prince must learn from two specific animals, the lion and the fox. Why these two? Because they cover each other's blind spots. He points out that the lion is terrifying. It's strong. It can scare off the wolves. If you have a literal army of wolves coming at you, being a lion is perfect. You roar, you bite, you win. But the lion has a fatal flaw, a weakness that gets it killed. The lion cannot defend itself against snares, traps. The lion is too proud, too loud. It charges in a straight line. It doesn't look down to see the wire across the path. It doesn't smell the poison in the meat. The lion thinks strength is the answer to every question. And that is why lions fail. History is full of them. Leaders who were strong, brave, and commanding. Men who could win a battlefield, but lost the war because they walked right into a political trap they never saw coming. They rely on force when they should have used their heads. Machiavelli says, "Those who rely simply on the lion do not understand what they are about." That's a polite way of calling them idiots.
So you need the fox. The fox is weak. Physically, it's nothing special. A wolf could kill a fox easily. But the fox? The fox is smart. The fox knows where the traps are. The fox can sniff out a lie. The fox knows how to fake a retreat, how to play dead, how to look harmless right before it bites your throat out. Machiavelli argues that you need to be the fox to recognize the snares, and the lion to frighten the wolves. One without the other is a death sentence. If you're just the fox, the wolves, the aggressors, the armies, the brute threats will eat you alive. You can't outsmart a brick to the face. You need claws. But if you're just the lion, you'll end up caught in a net, wondering how you lost when you were so much stronger than everyone else. This is the balance, the centaur. And Machiavelli takes it a step further. He gets cynical here, but he's honest. He talks about keeping your word. The man side of you wants to keep promises, integrity, right? Machiavelli shakes his head. He warns that a prudent ruler cannot keep his word when doing so would harm him, or when the reasons for making the promise have vanished. Why? If men were all good, this precept would not be good, he writes. If everyone else was honest, sure, be honest. But they aren't. He tells us that men are wretched creatures who won't keep their word to you, so you are under no obligation to keep yours to them. It sounds harsh, it sounds evil, but he frames it as survival. The lion tries to keep its word because it's proud. The fox knows that a promise is just a tool, a trap, or a key, and it uses it accordingly. So, looking at the centaur, we see the perfect strategist, not a monster, but a complete creature, someone who understands the laws of men, but carries the instincts of the wild. The ability to be strong enough to crush the threat, but smart enough to see the plot against you. That is what Machiavelli demands. Not goodness, not evil, but adaptability, the readiness to be whatever the moment requires. Most fail because they are stuck in one mode. They are too noble, or too violent, or too tricky without the muscle to back it up. You have to be both. You have to be everything. Man, beast, lion, fox.